Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is a virtual book launch for We Are All Things by Elliott Colla and Ganzeer. The chapbook is an illustrated prose poem that invites us to imagine the mystery of feeling and the longing nature of existence. It's beautifully written and illustrated, and I can't get over how great it looks. We Are All Things is the latest publication from Radix Media, a worker-owned printer and publisher based in Brooklyn, New York. My name is Sarah, and I'm one of its 4 members. Radix started out as a commercial printer around 2011 and expanded into book publishing in 2018 with Aftermath, Explorations of Loss and Grief. Our goal as a publisher is to publish new ideas and fresh perspectives, prioritizing the voices of typically marginalized communities to get to the root of the human experience. We're also proud to say that all of our titles are lovingly edited, designed, and printed in-house using union labor. Right now, we're joined by 3 amazing artists. Elliott Colla is the writer behind We Are All Things. He teaches Arabic literature at Georgetown University, and his first book, Conflicted Antiquities, Egyptology, Egyptomania, Egyptian Modernity, explores the colonial roots of modern Egyptology. Elliott's first novel, Baghdad Central, was turned into a television series by Channel 4 in the UK and is currently available via Hulu. Ganzeer is the co-collaborator of We Are All Things and illustrated the chapbook. Ganzeer operates seamlessly between art, design, and storytelling, creating what he has coined as concept pop. With over 40 exhibitions to his name, Ganzeer's work has been seen in a wide variety of art galleries, impromptu spaces, alleyways, and major museums around the world, including the Brooklyn Museum, the Palace of the Arts in Cairo, and the Greek State Museum. And the conversation is going to be moderated by Molly Crabapple, an artist and writer based here in New York. She's the author of 2 books, Drawing Blood and Brothers of the Gun, which was longlisted for a National Book Award in 2018. She's currently a 2020 New America Fellow and a 2020 Bard Fellow at the Brooklyn Public Library. Molly has also been making illustrations of essential workers that are coming out in The Nation weekly. And now I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you so much for that awesome introduction, Sarah, and mad respect to Radix, one of the coolest and most veteran radical printers in the city. So I'm so excited to be here with Elliott and Ganzeer, even though we are locked in our like tiny Zoom boxes, in quarantine. And I'm so excited to have written the introduction to this book and to get to talk to you about it. So We Are All Things is this like exquisitely illustrated little book that's like little in the sense of being like a jewel is little or like a vial of poison is little, something that is sort of perfect and encapsulated in itself and packs a sort of deadly punch. It's the story of lost love in Alexandria, but told not from the point of view of the lovers, but from the point of view of all of the objects in the room that have witnessed the final, the final fuck and the final breakup of the relationship. And it's illustrated with like such graphic power by Ganzeer, and I just loved it so much. And I wanted to start off not with a question about the contents of We Are All Things, but a question about making physical objects, because not only is We Are All Things a book about objects, about their secret history and about the stories that they could tell, but it is an object. It's a book that is beautifully printed in pink and black by Radix, and it's something that you can, hold in your hands. Why did you want to make this as an object and not just as something that you would put on a screen?
I'm going to tell part of the story, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ganzeer because this is actually such a great question. Sarah, thank you for hosting us, and Molly for hosting us and getting this going. So I had this this text, and I'll just come out. I wrote this back in the 1990s, and it's partly autobiographical. but I had this text, and I had tried to do things with it. It seemed like it was just there was something about it that wasn't finished. And a few years ago, I met Ganzeer, and we just started talking about things. And I sent it to him, and he started taking it apart. And it's hard to imagine what it looked. It was basically continuous text on 1 or 2 pages, and that was it. And he started taking it apart and giving each of those objects its due, you know, in a visual form. And then that completely brought out something that was already there in the text, but really made it clear to me, oh, yeah, this is something else. So I started this in 1997, but really Ganzeer is the one who figured out what to do and how to make it into what it is. So to get to the question, or because it is such a beautiful object, I have my copy right here, and for all my thinking about objects, I actually was completely ignorant about objects, because Ganzeer and I worked on this maybe a year ago. We were almost done, right? And he said, okay, well, what are you gonna, he sent me the PDF, and he said, what are you gonna do? And I said, I'm gonna go down to my office and Xerox it and staple it, and I'll give it to some friends. And he said, okay, so then I'm gonna hand this off to him, because he actually had a thought of the object as an object that I never got to. So Ganzeer, take it.
So as much as I'm totally for Xeroxed, photocopied zines and everything. For one, like from the get-go, I designed this with this kind of two-color palette in mind, and you know, as I was designing it, I saw it kind of already sort of produced in a certain way, because I also you know, have a background and kind of experience in like printmaking and assembling kind of printed objects and things. So I kind of saw it that way, and I knew, and I at least saw that it would, if it was like printed in offset in like a 2-color printing method, or maybe using like a risograph machine or something, then you're really utilizing that 2-color aspect of it, where you're using a printing process or a machine that is only meant to produce these 2 colors in a way, right? And it would kind of emphasize, you know, just the results of printing that way is very different from if you just print it off of like a 4-color digital inkjet or something. Especially like if it's like not a very good one, you know. There are a lot better like digital printing, print on demand type things now that do it quite well. But if it's like a cheap kind of home printer, or if it's just like you go to like the FedEx or the Staples or something, it doesn't really bring out that quality. And it felt like it was important for a book about objects, or booklet about objects for that matter, for the object of the booklet itself to like have kind of like a tactile quality to it, where you get a sense that that, you know, this particular paper went through a certain process to become the paper that it is, you know, and this particular color or this particular ink went through a process to become the ink that it is, and so on, right? So the object that speaks about objects had to be an interesting object to hold in your hands, basically.
And one of the other things that's really cool about the 2-color scheme is that each of the objects, it's 2 things at once, right? Like the mattress is a mattress, and you draw it as a mattress. But the mattress is also like a thinking, feeling creature that sees itself as providing a home to 1,000 bed bugs and fleas that are like fucking and breeding inside it. And so what you do is you show what I want to call like the mundane reality of the object in the black ink. You know, you do the beautiful line drawing of the mattress. And then on top of it, in the pink ink, you have the orgy of all the bed bugs. So the 2-color thing, it's not just that it looks really cool. It does look really cool, but it's an essential aspect of the visual storytelling. It's really damn smart.
Thanks. Yeah, I like that idea of almost illustrating these different aspects as if they exist in like on completely different planes, right? So this is a world where you have the actual bed, and then all the bed bugs is like an entirely different world, and it's illustrated with complete neglect, or just like laid on top of this other illustration with complete neglect of its reality, its perspective, or whatever, how it's situated.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also so cool, like with silkscreen, right? Because that's literally what silkscreen is, like the two screens, layered on top of each other. So I thought that was so damn smart. So one of the other things that's kind of interesting about our moment now, and it made me think more about physical objects, is we're all trapped in home, and we're all experiencing the world through screens. And we were already experiencing the world through screens way too damn much. At least I was. Maybe you guys were more like psychologically healthy than me. But now it feels like everything, including our book launch, is something that's mediated through the computer. And at the same time, we're all just like locked in our apartments. So even though Elliott, you wrote that this is something that you wrote in the 90s, this booklet seems so right for now, because it's essentially the story of a room. And I feel like we're all communing with all of the objects in our room because we can't fucking leave. We can't get new objects. We're just stuck there with our coffee cups and our old rugs and our like bed sheets that bear the imprint of past lovers and all of that. Tell me, how does reading this feel now in the age of like plague and quarantine, both of you guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like I said, I wrote this so long ago, but it's and it was really kind of a writing exercise. I was in an actual room. That's an actual room. It's a friend's. It's in a friend's apartment. You could go there and you could see it. It looks looks different, but it was about this experience that we've all had. Anybody who writes or draws or paints, right? You sit around and at some point it comes down to you in a room, probably by yourself, or putting headphones on so you're tuning out and you're just living in that space, right? And when I came back to this so many years later, I found, oh, this spoke to me exactly as it did when I wrote it. And most of the things I've written don't do that. Like, so it's partly being out of time, but partly I think that's the experience we get into as artists when we're up in the places where we write or paint or draw or, create, right? That like, if you can't do that in a room, if you can't be alive to the stuff around you, you're going to be bored out of your mind. So part of it is maybe that is just kind of coming back to, if you have kids or if you're around kids, you know that these objects are not inert, right? That they have lives, and so that's part of it too, right? And I think we're all there, like you said. Yeah, I have little statues. I'll try to grab one. Like this room is filled with things that are perfect for Zoom. I didn't realize that, but I'll try to bring a pop in later. Ganzeer.
I like the idea that like we're all sitting in, like Molly said, like we're all trapped in our homes, in our rooms, in quarantine, and essentially anyone can write about the objects that are in their space that they're surrounded by, and you would end up with a million different stories, even though our situation is kind of exactly the same. We're all just like sitting around in our rooms with our things, but like if each one of us sat and like started to think about the things that are in our space, the kind of many, even if it's just the memories we have with the objects, or how the objects came to reach us, and the kind of the changing of hands they've gone through, and so on. You end up with like a million different stories about people just essentially just hanging out in the rooms. And that's kind of awesome. So it's a really great realization that Elliott's text brings to mind.
The other thing about this that made it so right for now is that it's the story of like losing someone. It's the story of losing a lover. And what we've all lost now is we've all lost each other. We've all lost the ability to like see and touch our friends, you know, our lovers, the people that we like got drunk with halfway across the world. We've all become exiled from the outside world. We've all become, you know, confined to these small spaces. I mean, there's just this line where the mirror is speaking, and it talks about how the mirror jealously guarded the trace of visitors. And I was thinking about that. I was like, my house perhaps jealously guards the trace of visitors, the trace of parties that lasted till 4 a.m. that it can no longer have, you know. One thing that I also loved about this is that even though, you know, it's the story of a room and objects and, you know, an affair, and it's quite bounded, it's also something that's deeply stoked in Alexandria, which is one of the most nostalgia-laden cities on earth, you know, because of the work of like Cavafy and Durrell and so many other writers. And I wanted to ask you, Elliott, about Alexandria and about why you chose to do this in Alexandria and what that means to you.
Yeah. So the room is not actually in Alexandria.
Fuck.
No, but it could be, and I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think that's the only place that's named, right? There's a furniture maker, right? So, so it's and it actually doesn't matter, frankly, that, you know, I say it's not there, because it might as well be there. It's the room is filled with this particular room, and the objects I was writing about are from a very aristocratic old Egyptian family, and so they were antiques, and they, you know, some of those, I'm not making it up, those objects kind of, you know, are there. So so part of it has to do with the past. Like, these are old things, and in being in Alexandria, Alexandria for me, and I think for anybody who's spent time in Egypt, Alexandria, especially in the winter, is just this experience of deep nostalgia, sort of melancholic experience of what has passed. It's fraught though, and kind of deeply colonial, and even racist and so on. So there's like all of that is there in that history, and those objects are there. So so maybe that's a way in which this particular story is stretching out stretching out in the direction of Alexandria, or places like Alexandria. I love you connected it to Athens in the introduction and the forward, and then but it could be connected, you know what, to Marseille or Istanbul, like Mediterranean cities that have seen better days or are former capitals, right? They all kind of have that. There's these kind of moods that they may have that you captured. So I love that you were connecting it instantly with Athens, because that's like, I've been in rooms like this in other places, and I thought, that's the room. This is also the room. Yeah.
Perhaps someday New York will be that, someday sooner rather than later. How do you guys fill your days now, by the way, now that we're all locked indoors with the plague? Though I assume that you guys have more freedom than me and Sarah do, because you're not in New York.
I mean, I'm not quite. I mean, Houston is on lockdown, just like I'm assuming most cities. So, you know, and most places are closed. So, you know, you could go out, but there wouldn't be anywhere to go, really. I spend my time pretty much same way I spent it before the plague, which is I sit in my room and I draw all day, and I make art and things, and it just like it's a very time consuming vocation. And it's very labor intensive, and I'm used to being in quarantine anyway, you know, pandemic or not. The only difference is that I just have no travel to look forward to, or I don't get to go to like the fitness center to exercise or anything. And they're like, so sure, there are differences in like that there would be some opportunities to step out of the house, but otherwise it's more or less the same without any of those things.
I'm pretty similar. I've been on leave. I was on leave this spring. Right, I'm writing a book on kind of radical social movements in Egypt and poetry. And so I was kind of already in that kind of sitting in a room with myself for days on end when this started. Not a huge difference. The difference now is that my wife is a high school teacher, and suddenly her life is incredibly busy because the work just doesn't, the work is at home all the time now. And then we have a daughter, and we also live in a house, and we're not, it's DC, lower density, so we can get out. There's forests near where we are, and we can go for walks or runs and kind of get out and do stuff. We play a lot of badminton in the backyard, a lot of badminton. That's mostly what I've been doing.
I wanted to invite you guys to read your favorite passages of this, because this is like, it's fucking beautiful. You know, it's like a crushingly beautiful thing. Do you have any passages, Elliott, that you'd like to read from it?
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to read from the Mattresses story, as you guys just talked about. And to set it up, let me just say that I didn't know what a bedbug was until I was in my early 20s living in Egypt. And I'd never heard anybody, I mean, you've heard of bedbugs, but when you're sleeping in a bed that's filled with bedbugs and you have no idea what is happening to your body, and you cannot sleep for days on end, it's something else, right? So, and then I had to learn what the problem was from friends who came over, because anyway, so the mattress, the idea, this passage is really coming out of an experience of pain for me, and trying to imagine the mattress's point of view. The mattress sings to herself. I'm a generous sea, and in my cottony depths swim schools of creatures, an ocean of life. Woe to those who drown me with poisons and powders. Woe to those who try to kill my sons and daughters. How can I compare the thousands of creatures whose eggs I have held in my bosom, whose tiny bodies I have shielded, to those few seeds of yours which have scattered and died in my shallows? I can hold so many, and I have sheltered so many tender lives before you came to swim. The stiff, dry sheets know nothing but the surface. Below, inside the mattress, another mother gives birth. He scratches at a flea on his leg, but senses none of the depth on which he floats. But it is incomplete without that image. Look at that beauty.
So I'm an idiot. I have to go get my copy from downstairs. Do you want to just hit pause on the recording?
We're just gonna like talk smack about you while you're gone. You have no idea.
All right, do that. I'll be right back. So yeah, my favorite part is this bit right here with the this fellow's portrait, because I've like walked into like many apartments where there's just like an old portrait of someone who like no one has anything to do with, like they're renting this apartment and there's like a really old portrait of someone, and it's just a peculiar thing to have this presence, you know, in the room that no one has any relationship to. So the bit I'm going to start from: to look upon them in the early morning, one sees the wash of a man from the previous century. Minwali Effendi Khawaja, banker, coat and tie, spectacles, mustachios, shiny black hair, tarbush in hand. Curiously, it is not the face that captures the eye, Rather, it is the gold watch that sparks in the subject's waistcoat, where the light collects and catches fire. I really like this part also because it kind of connects to the really early on in the book where we see this bit and sort of like, well, there's a little flame inside the bulb, right? Well, a flick of index and the object electrifies, bulb bursting into hot red glow that calms into white. So I just like love how that correlates to this part later with this man's gold watch catching the light. That's my favorite part.
I love it so much. And I love that one too, because there's always something so cool when you have an illustrated book and then you have writing about art and then also art that's reinterpreting the art and like layering on top of that. And I mean, this book, it's such like a palimpsest, right, of all of these layers. So I'm gonna read my introduction that I wrote to it. And then I think we have like 10 more minutes maybe to discuss you know, what we've been doing lately, but this was my thoughts on it. A light bulb floats off its lamp. An ornate gilt mirror frames a tangle of sheets. We Are All Things starts off with images drawn in black and punk rock pink. Elliott Colla and Ganzeer's nostalgic ode to a lost love in a city that for 2 millennium has been the focus of every variety of love, longing, and loss. It's a slim little book, slim being de rigueur for rubies, cyanide caplets, and samizdat, that brings to mind Cavafy's younger cousin, the one who spray-painted graffiti under bridges late on Friday nights. And it's beautiful, at a time when we need beauty, when the internet's constant deluge of whiz-bang horror has burnt out our receptors for delight. It's also the story about stuff, things, objects, what horrors they come from, how they might hunger and dream. What past lives have they lived? The rug, the portrait of Effendi Khawaja, banker, the water glass. In a shut-in's room, every object is heavy with the memories of a woman he has lost. Her pink lips pressed against the water glass, her body sprawled across those tangled bed sheets, the mirror reflected in her darkly painted eyes. The objects keep the woman, just as they keep the city at bay. They cosset her in immobility and dust. I run my finger across the book's edge. We need objects, especially in a world that has been made cocaine speedy and pixeled light by the internet. I add the book to my shelf. The days passed so fast, and I stare at my own assortment of mirrors, dust, and rugs in a decaying apartment in Athens. I wonder how long they will survive me, what travels they may go on, and what memories they might take.
That's
so,
lovely.
Elliott, what if you did another story about what adventures each component of this book went on, about the forest that was, you know, felled to make the paper, about how the ink felt when it was being like squeezed through the silk screens, and all the places that this book went? Where do you think would be the most interesting place that this book could have gone?
And the staples, don't forget the staples.
the romance of the staples so freighted with that nostalgia and longing.
They waited for thousands of years as rock to be. No, I mean, you know, the part of this is kind of philosophically. So, I mean, as a teacher, this is like the most I think I can teach somebody is to see what our world is made up of, and that everything that goes into even a small book is touching so many human hands, and then those human hands themselves are powered by all these other objects, right? So the story of making the book object, right, is the story also of machinery in Brooklyn, it's that web is what life is, right? And it's really powerful to remember how much of our sense of being human selves is bound up in our objects, right? And that shouldn't be pathologized. There's different ways to think of it. I mean, it can be a fetish, or it could be part of a network of the objects that give us the power we have in our lives, right? So we can't do things without pens or brushes or lenses or whatever it is, right? So that's the web we live in. That's the stuff. And once you start to think about all the stories, there is a story. I mean, you're laughing and you're not. It's really fun to think about. Well, it's not fun to think about the forest getting cut down necessarily, but that's where our imagination, that's one of the dimensions our imaginations, we have to stretch in that way if we want to understand how we're here and what we're doing and with what.
And
so I mean, part of the story is about being dumped. Okay, so I've been dumped many times in life, and that feeling of being like, you feel like a thing. And what do we mean by that? Like being used or something like that, that's not what we've been in that position. To be dumped or left or broken up with or whatever, and it's painful to think of to have that feeling that you're used as an object, right? The flip side, though, is that this is how we as subjects are formed, not by treating everything as objects, but like we have to be able to imagine all these subjectivities that are out there. Some might just be kind of whimsical, but I think there's nothing whimsical about understanding the story of forests and paper and staples and mines. And I have no idea where ink comes from, and so I'm laughing. I don't know where it comes from. Like, I have no idea. But that's a problem. That should be a problem, because to the extent that we can't map our way in the world of the things we use every day, that's what it's like to be a thing. That's alienation, right? That's to not know is anything about the things we're living with. That's the problem. So yeah, this is a huge story to think about.
well, it's like every time you look at something intensely enough, right? It's like diving into the ocean of all of existence. And my final question is for Ganzeer. So artists, we look at stuff differently. When I draw something, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but there's two levels that I'm looking at the thing. Like, let's say I'm, drawing my ink. I'm looking at it and maybe I'm like trying to get like the inkness of it, or I'm trying to like convey some sort of like cool, gritty mood or whatever. But then I'm also looking at it in this very kind of technical way where I'm like, okay, this is the angle that things are connecting at. This is, the curve of the thing at the bottom. And I'm kind of breaking it down, right? So that I can draw it. Drawing is like this super decontextualizing, objectifying thing, where everything, whether like you're drawing, like a girl that you just slept with, or whether you're drawing a mass murder, everything ultimately gets broken down into these like lines and angles so you can reproduce it. Do you look at drawing like that? What do you think about when you draw?
Well, lately especially, I find myself more attracted to like trying to depict the idea of objects or people or whatever it is that's being drawn, more so than really attempting to respectfully depict the voluminous, the structure of a thing, because it has to do with things, because it's the thing we're drawing with, right? Which is basically whether it's pencil, ink, or a brush or whatever. Like the more I use it, the more I realize, well, you're just making marks on a flat surface. That's all we're doing. And so at the end of the day, whatever it is I do, it's never going to be the object, right? It's only a couple of lines that depict the idea of an object, right? So if you look at ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, right, you see like the hieroglyph for water, which is just like a little zigzag, little squiggly zigzag thing. You look at it and you don't need someone to explain to you that this is water, and you get that it's water right away, and it's so brilliant. Even though, of course, it has nothing to do with the reality of water. Like, it's not like water when you think of like trying to depict water, like this liquid substance.
It's so
like,
fucking hard.
It's insane. Like I'm making a couple of marks on a piece of paper. Why would that have anything to do? Like, how could that possibly resemble this weird water thing, substance? So that idea of just using these markings and trying to like to occupy a place that's like not entirely abstract, really, but somewhere between abstract and representation, right? There's this in-between space that I feel like I enjoy being in, and just trying to capture the idea of a thing more so than really trying to do what the thing actually is or looks like, you know?
The platonic idea of waterness, as opposed to like the full complexity of every little thing in the glass of water.
Right, exactly.
So I think, Sarah, do you have any other questions or anything that I should ask about, or anything, guys, do you have anything I should be plugging? Anything that, you'd like to talk about more?
No questions on my end.
Ganzeer, you've got a solar grid issue you're working on.
Yeah, that is correct. I am working on chapter 5 of the solar grid, which is an overtly ambitious graphic novel I've been working on for the past, I want to say 5 years now. But interestingly enough, I mean, it does also correlate to objects in a way, like I realize now, like just thinking about it, because the way the story unfolds, like there is like an element of the objects kind of that are passing hands over centuries, essentially telling the story. So I guess Elliot and I have been on the same wavelengths for a while without really knowing it. But anyway, I'm working on this science fiction graphic novel. It's not working.
Look at that. He's like, I'm working on the science fiction graphic novel. And Elliot, you also have a TV show that's out now.
I do. Baghdad Central on Hulu, and I hope you like it. If you need 6 hours, if you're stuck at home, need something to watch on a screen, it's pretty good.
And it's such a relief, because I feel like in America, every single fucking story we get about the Iraq War is the story about like a heroic American soldier who has a square jaw and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes, that's not the story this is telling. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's super well done. I was really impressed that they were able to. It's a mostly Arab cast and everything, and yeah,
they're good. They're really good.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
And it's the story about the Iraq War that's actually about Iraq and Iraqis.
Yeah.
So it was a pleasure talking to all you guys, and it's an amazing book. Everyone who's watching this, like, pick up a copy, pick up 10 copies, get one for yourself, get one for everyone who isn't sick of talking to you on the phone yet, and get a few to like scatter around the city to leave as presents.
Yeah, thank you all for being part of this conversation, and also thank you to Printed Matter for hosting us.
Thank you so much, Printed Matter.
Great chatting with you guys all. Take care of yourselves.
Okay.
You too.
Take care, you guys. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ganzeer. Great to see you guys.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.